Hello gamers and welcome back. I'm Rob, of course, at AojHAgA if you want to call me by my in-game name. And another month means another monthly meta. Again, sorry for the delay. Normally I like to post these at the first of every month, but with midterms, I've been getting destroyed and trying to study as much as possible. So sorry about that small delay we had there. For those of you who are unfamiliar with how we do our monthly metas, I'm going to go over all of the classes and all of the decks within those classes that when you go into ladder and hit play and you verse that deck, this is what you're going to be seeing 90 to 95% of the time. Again, I can't cover every single deck that you guys are going to see due to the fact that that video taking way too long and it's kind of pointless. I'd rather cover what you're going to see most of the time in as short as time as possible. So with that, let's head on over into the first class we're going to be covering, and that's going to be Priest. So some of these classes and decks that we're going to go over haven't really changed a ton, but there's a lot of these that actually have changed quite a bit in the past month, which is surprising because normally the later you get into an expansion cycle and when the next expansion is ramping up, the less diversity and the less kind of deck implementation and changes are made. But we've actually seen quite a few decks pop up and a few decks disappear with the most recent changes to Raza Priest and the Pirates. So the deck that we have here is the Big Priest. Again, this deck in particular hasn't really changed at all. It's a very powerful deck and can definitely cheese out some wins. I mean, you draw Barnes on 3 or 4 depending if you have coin or not. You play Barnes into a giant minion, and then that minion gets brought back with Eternal Servitude, or you can go ahead and Shadow Essence, and then from there you clean up the game with a lesser Diamond Spellstone to bring, you know, all of your big minions back. The deck is pretty, I don't want to say it's very hard to play, but it's not like some turns are a little bit more complicated than others, but it's a pretty straightforward deck in its game plan. It doesn't have any super burst, you know, potential. There's not like a set combo piece that you need to put together. You know, the deck kind of you have X amount of moves per turn, and all of those moves head towards the same game plan of trying to summon big minions early on and then keep on resurrecting them. So not a lot to explain there. Very powerful deck, and does well against it does well against aggro decks in particular. If you can, you know, pull out some of these taunts early on, and it has a huge amount of AoE. It actually doesn't do that bad against control either, because a lot of the control decks don't have the ability to kill, you know, 4 minions that all cost 10 or more that are generating, you know, Lich King at the end of the turn generates a really powerful card, and so does Ysera. So if the decks can't deal with those guys in a couple turns, the value that the single monsters on the board bring out is too much for a lot of these other control decks to almost deal with. And the amount of times you resurrect them for basically half their mana cost or cheaper is really, really powerful as well. The next deck we're going to talk about is a deck that is actually popping up more and more, and it's Big Priest is probably the least popular of all of the decks, or all of the Priest decks in this particular category. Not that you should denote it, but it's losing popularity, and these two other ones are definitely gaining popularity, especially, again, this Combo Dragon Priest, which revolves around using the Inner Fire Divine Spirit combo. There's been decks that revolve around this for a while now. Originally it was in the form of a Silence Priest, so you'd play, you know, high statted minions that can't attack, you'd silence those minions, and then you'd buff them up and attack with them because their stats are already high. Humongous Razor Leaf, and I always called him Sentinel. I know I always called the card Sentinel, but the card was not called Sentinel. It's the 2 mana 4/5 dude. So this deck, you have cards like the Twilight Drake, the Operative, and a lot of red editions run the Tar Creeper. This list doesn't. I pulled this list off of Asmo, who plays the deck a lot. I haven't played this deck at all, so I didn't want to give you a list that I've built because I haven't played the deck. Most of the deck lists come from me myself that I've built, and then, you know, you can make modifications through that. But this particular list came from Asmo, who's been performing very well on ladder, consistently hits top 100 legend, great player. But just because I don't play the deck doesn't mean I don't know how the deck runs. Again, it revolves around buffing minions HP, interfiring, and going for a huge like OTK turn with a minion that's at least 15/15, or it can get up to the, I think the high, not the highest, but like you can get them to 48/48s, and it's not that difficult with cards like Talon Priest and Double Divine Spirit. You also, of course, have your Shadow Visions to be able to pull more Divine Spirits and or Interfires based on what you need. It also, it doesn't look like it, but it also has an outvalue game plan with cards like Draconoid Operative, Netherspite Historian, and Dustbreaker. So if you're playing against maybe a more aggressive base deck, and you don't need to combo your opponent from 25 life because you're just trying to survive. This deck can actually outvalue some of the more aggressive base decks like Paladin if you just happen to Dustbreaker a couple times, or your operative can pull something good from their deck that generates a lot of value as well. Not to say that a lot of the aggro decks run cards that are worth value to pull from, but sometimes they play something a little funky, or you can pull something to wipe the board. Regardless, very powerful deck, very hard deck to play. It's not as easy as Big Priest. I don't think it's as complicated maybe as some Miracle Rogue at some points in times, but it's still a very, very complex deck in regards to some of the other more powerful decks on ladder, like Spiteful Priest, which is not near as hard as to play as this. So that's the deck we're actually going to be covering next, is the Spiteful Summoner Priest. With the loss of Bone Mare and Corridor Creeper, they basically got replaced with more silence with the Song Stealer. A lot of people started running 2 Free from Ambers. The original build of this ran 2 Mind Controls, 1 Free from Amber. I've always liked the double Free from Amber, double Mind Control, because it allows you most of the time to be able to play both Spiteful Summoners while having a big spell in your deck. And again, the deck is even called Spiteful Summoner Priest or Big Spell Priest. So if you're not pulling, if you draw Spiteful Summoner and you play it and you don't have any spells in your deck, that hurts this deck a lot, because it kind of revolves around that. So only 4 spells in the entire deck. The rest of it is solely just minions. With that being said, each turn is kind of pretty easy. It's like, oh, like most decks, you have the option to, like, do you play a minion? Do you play a spell? Do you clear the board? Do you do direct damage? This deck is, do I play a minion? Or do I play a stronger minion? Or do I play 2 weaker minions and no stronger minion? Or do I play 1 stronger minion, no weaker minions, right? So the decisions with this deck are very much so scaled down due to the fact that you just don't have the spells or any sort of synergy with spells and minions in here. It's just minions. Play the strongest minion every turn, attack their minions, or attack face. I guess a big decision would be Free from Amber. Which of the 3 giant minions are you picking? Or my opponent played a Void Lord. Would I like to Mind Control this? Or do I want to hold back? So unfortunately, this deck really hasn't changed that much. It's a very powerful deck, and the reason it's so powerful is because every turn you're basically playing a minion that's very good for its stats. Turn 1, Northshire Cleric. Turn 2, Netherspite Historian or Shadow Ascendant. Turn 3 is either generating value with Glimmerroot or buffing a minion that's already on the board, or playing Tar Creeper, which again has really good stats and is hard to get through. Turn 4 is Twilight Drake or Dustbreaker. Dustbreaker being a backup plan if you lost the board. Twilight Drake being a go-go plan if you have the board. Scalebane or Operative, again, value or buffing the board. Turn 6 is Spiteful Summoner, which is summon like 15 and 15 in stats for 6 mana. And then anything after Spiteful Summoner, you're basically, again, just playing more big minions or taking your opponent's big minions. So it just curves out, really, this deck just curves. It's just really, really, really powerful. Heading to our next one is going to be Paladin. Our next class, I should say, is Paladin. We're going to be looking at the OTK Paladin again. I don't really play this deck that often. This, again, is Asmo's list. I find Asmo, again, a really good player, and a lot of the decks he plays plays them very well, and he plays them a lot. So I would trust his lists in regards to those particular decks. He doesn't play a lot of different decks, but the decks he plays the shit out of them, and they're modified to the point where they run very, very well. And this is his OTK Paladin list. Again, the OTK comes from playing Uther, and then you use Auction Master Beardo to be able to combo to use your hero power more than 1 times per turn. And then from there, you summon all 4 of the horsemen. But in lieu of being able to do this, you need to play Burgly Bully to be able to generate coins, so you have the mana to be able to do this. As we know, Auction Master costs 3, a hero power costs 2, and then we have 5 mana left over, and we're going to need to use the hero power 1 more time. So you're going to need, coins from the Burgly Bully, and or you have other options with the Hydrologist to be able to cycle it as well. And a lot of the times you may not need to be able to have 2 or 3 coins. 1 coin will do it as long as you can get one of the horsemen down and your opponent doesn't kill it, right? So you play a horseman, your opponent doesn't deal with it that turn, you Auction Master, and you can just kill him. But a lot of the times, once your opponent knows you're playing the OTK Paladin, they will do their best to make sure no horseman ever lives going into your turn, which makes them use a lot of their CC and field to clear, which again, they're going to only have so much of that before they run out. So this deck, Really good against control, not that great against aggro, but it definitely holds its own due to the fact it runs, Spike Ridge Steed, Sun Sorrow, Sunkeeper Tarim, Wild Pyromancers, Loot Hoarders, Call to Arms. Has a decent amount of field clear, really not a ton due to the fact it only runs 2 consecrations and 2 equalities. That's basically its big boom, and after its big boom it doesn't really have anything, so you have to either fight with minions or fight with buffed minions or kind of just live long enough to squeak out a win with the OTK against aggro decks. So very powerful against control, not so powerful against aggro. Next deck we're going to cover, again, the OTK Paladin, probably being the least popular of all the Paladin decks, but still a deck I wanted to mention, because when you play, you're playing against Paladin all day, you go against aggro, and all of a sudden you play against a Paladin who's not putting any pressure on you whatsoever, and he's just drawing a shit ton of cards. You need to be able to know what's coming, because if you don't, you're just going to lose that game. You're going to be like, what the hell just happened? You just played 4 horsemen and I'm dead. So it's always good to know, maybe, not like the most popular, but the runner-up too. So that's why I included that deck list. Plus, it's actually been gaining popularity due to the amount of Warlock on ladder. It does very well against Warlock. So the next deck we're going to cover is the Murcock Paladin. Very, very good deck in my opinion. This is my personal list. Again, I run the Legendary Paladin weapon, which I find really good. Rob, you don't run Maul. I like Maul. Maul gives my minions plus attack, or summon Silverhand recruits, or gives them taunt, or gives them whatever. That's fine. You can run Maul and take out the legendary weapon. I just think the legendary weapon is really good and fairly underrated due to the fact that it basically has infinite value in a deck that after you use your burst, like after you call to arms twice and stuff, your deck's running kind of thin. So it's always good to just have some reoccurring damage. Like, they always can expect minions to get buffed or you being able to trade with your weapon. It does cost a lot of mana, but if you look at the deck curve, I mean, you only have 2 minions that cost 6 or more. I mean, like 5 or more. You don't even have any 5-drops. You just have 2 6s and that's it. So, I mean, to be able to throw in another 6, in my opinion, is really not that big of a deal. But besides that, the decks always run the same. You basically just curve stone them out. You want, on turn 1, you want to play a 1-mana Murloc. On turn 2, you want to play a 2-mana Murloc. If you don't have a 2-mana Warlock, you want 2 1-mana Murlocs. On turn 3, you want to play a 3-mana Murloc. On turn 4, you either want to buff your Murlocs or play a card to bring out more Murlocs. On turn 4, or buff your Murlocs. That's another option. And then when turn 6 runs around, you're either scaling down your opponent's big minions or you're scaling up your tiny minions. But the game's mostly over most of the time the game is over between turns 6 and 8. If it goes on any longer, you're depending on cards like Divine Favor to be able to draw you back into the game so you can continuously put board pressure. But besides that, this deck runs out of steam exceedingly quickly. And that's just the fact that everything is so cheap in the deck, and then you Divine Favor. So you basically throw up on the board, play as many minions as possible that synergize well. And then from there, you Divine Favor, draw back your hand, throw up again. By then, you've drawn, again, another Divine Favor. And while you're doing this, you're smacking them in the face with your legendary weapon. So pretty straightforward deck, been around a while now. Before, actually, both these decks, the Dude Paladin, which used to be like I guess I'll mention that, but Corridor Creeper, again, when that got nerfed, he left these decks. This next deck we're going to talk about, though, is a deck that just recently popped up in the past couple weeks. It's a deck we actually tested right out of the get-go with the new set, the Dude Paladin. We played Lion, we played Stand Against Darkness, we played Level Up. We actually, the deck that we built about 2.5 months ago is very, very, very close to the deck being played now. The problem is I didn't test it long enough and I didn't modify it long enough. You know me, we like to play a deck and then we'll move on to something else. And especially with it being a more aggressive base deck, it's not really my cup of tea, but at least we had the idea 2.5 months ago. This deck revolves around playing, again, very similar to the Murlocs, throwing up on the board, but instead of throwing up Murlocs, you're throwing up Silverhand recruits. These Silverhand recruits, instead of getting buffed by Gentle Megasaur, they now get buffed by Level Up and Light Fuse Stegodon. Instead of, being able to War Leader and stuff like that, you have Stand Against Darkness and Vine Cleaver. So the points of the deck and the way they run are very, very similar, but just instead of buffing Murlocs, you're buffing Silverhand recruits with Steward or Darkshire and things of that nature. If I had to pick between the two decks, they're both very, very powerful. If you like Murlocs and you've played Murlocs, but you want to play Dude Paladin and you're not sure, Murloc is going to run very similar to this deck. There's not going to be a whole lot. You're not going to be like, oh my god, this deck is completely different. No, the deck is relatively the same, just in a different skin. Instead of called, again, Murlocs, they're called Silverhand recruits. I'm trying to there was something I was going to mention here about this, and then I totally lost it. Oh, yes. So basically, the reason Dude Paladin popped up is because this deck used to run the Pirate package. You would run the Captain, you know, the deckhand, and then the patches, and then run, you know, Blessings of the King and stuff like that. But now, instead, because of those getting moved over, people just replace those with, you know, Silverhand recruit buffing abilities, and that's how this deck actually popped up. It just replaced the pirate rendition, because there was Murlock Paladin, and then there was like a pirate-oriented one, and now the pirate-oriented one, due to the nerf of the pirates, just more so turned back into the Silverhand recruit, which is what I think Blizzard wanted to do, because Silverhand recruits, we haven't seen a mid-range shaman or a mid-range paladin since the GVG era when Quartermaster got rotated out. So it's kind of cool to see the Dude Paladin back. It just sucks that it's not like at least the mid-range Paladin back in the day wasn't so, it was aggressive, but it wasn't like this kind of aggressive. It didn't run 2 Divine Favors. Face Paladin ran 2 Divine Favors, but unfortunately now this one does. It's like a faster mid-range. Next deck, Rogue. This is going to be the Pirate Heavy Kingsbane Rogue. I'm not sure what happened to Blade Fury, to be honest. I'm looking at it now, and Blade Fury is just a blank kind of thing there. But I believe I ran 1 Blade Fury in this deck. If you calculate the cards, that should equal 30. Should be 1 Blade Fury. But anyway, there's 2 renditions of this deck. We'll go over both of them. This one's being the Pirate Heavy, more aggressive style Kingsbane Rogue. So with this, again, you kind of are slow in the early game. You want to draw your Shiny Finders, your Doomsayers, your Leeching Poison. From there, once you get your weapon equipped, you can start playing cards like Naga Corsair, Squid Face, and Captain. Most of the time, you don't really want to Shadow Step Greenskin. I mean, it's okay if you have no other option, but the cards you're looking to Shadow Step in here are your draw mechanics. So you're wanting to Shadow Step cards like the Cold Light Oracle. For some reason it was just not bringing up. And then a lot of times using 1 Deadly Poison is okay, but saving a Deadly Poison for your Valera so you can play 2 more, so you kind of get 3 in the deck, is important. But keep in mind, a lot of people are running Geist, so if you have a feeling your opponent's running Geist, try to get your Doomerang and Deadly Poisons out before they play that Geist, because not playing any Deadly Poisons and holding on for extra value with Valera and then them Geisting, well, they'll end up losing the game. So the difference in between this Pirate Heavy versus the normal just mill draw is the fact that this has a little bit more oomph in the middle game to be able to fight against opponents' minions, because with the other one, it's all dependent on Blade Furies, Vanishes, Saps, just beating them with the weapon and life stealing back with what the weapon costs, getting off good Doomsayers and stuff like that. This one actually has fighting back capabilities with cards like the Strider, the Corsair, the Squid Face, Captain, and stuff like that. So you're able to kind of battle the minions, or even put in some chip damage, because you're playing another slow control deck. Being able to put in some chip damage is going to help you in the later game when it comes to either fatigue or just smacking them in your face with your weapon. So after playing both of the renditions, the Pirate Heavy, which is the one I'm showing you now, and then I'll pop up just the straight mill version, this version we have here, I kind of leaning towards the Pirate Heavy version, not only in terms of how fun the deck is, but just how effective it is. Because like, with the Pirate Heavy version, you're playing against an aggro deck, you have the ability to fight your opponent on the board. Like, you can trade into their minions, and if they don't trade, you get to go face and do burst, or you get to make the trades. So there's some there's some oomph to having minions that can actually do something, rather than this deck, which depends heavily on cycle. If you don't draw the cycle, you're out of luck. Or the AoE, like double Blade Fury, which if you do, again, you don't draw, you're kind of out of luck. Not to say that like this version is better against control, the other version is better against, like, it kind of hedges more against the more aggressive base decks, because you have minions, like I said, that can battle. So just keep that in mind, that there's 2 different renditions, and each one is kind of hedging towards a particular deck that it's better against. But either way, both are really fun, and you should give them a try. Looking at the other, probably the least popular of, again, the rogues, because they're always going to be most populars and least populars of the decks for each class, is going to be the Quest Rogue. We actually saw a spike in play, very heavy spike in play, actually, when we saw a lot of Quest Mage, a lot of Cube Lock, and more specifically the Control Lock. So as more, and the Control Mage. So as control decks get really popular and more people play them, the more Quest Rogue we're going to see. If more aggro, like Dude Paladin, is around, the less Quest Rogue we're going to see, because Quest Rogue does well against basically only control. The deck almost automatically loses against any sort of quick deck. I mean, this deck just can't, it just doesn't have any minions to do anything against the more aggressive base decks. It has no AoE besides Vanish, which you do run 2 Vanishes, but shit, How many times, like, you know what I'm saying? By turn 6 against a Murlock or a dude Paladin, you're just dead most of the time anyway, even if you have Vanish. So then you got to prep Vanish, and then they're just going to reload on the board. Not to say it's a 0% win rate if you go against an aggro deck. It's just you want to be playing control decks when you queue up with this deck. So if it's control heavy meta, Quest Rogue is great. Aggro meta, you're gonna not do so well. You're gonna not do so well. The next class we're going to be covering is going to be the Hunter, but it looks like there's a problem with the image, so there'll be a cut here and then I'll pop it right back up. Alrighty, so we have the Secret Hunter right here. There's a couple different versions of this. Some people run Barnes and Rage, some people don't run Barnes and Rage. I found that being able to play Barnes on turn 3 or 4 and you pull Rage, you just end up cheesing some games that probably maybe you wouldn't have won. So it's not a bad combo to put in there. I threw it in there because a lot of players are currently playing it. I myself will never draw Barnes, I'll only draw Rage. So for those of you more unlucky based players, probably take out those two and add in maybe another Deadly Shot or a tech card to hedge against the meta. But this is actually a deck that's recently been popping up more and more often. Again, as control decks and tempo mage kind of run the ladder, you're able to squeak out pretty cool decks like we see here. This deck does very, very well against other decks that have no healing, so it does well against Rogue, it does well against the Mage. It does fairly well against the slower Priest decks due to the fact that you fill up the board with pretty resilient stuff. Dustbreaker is your biggest sphere, but besides that, the deck is not really worried about anything else. It does okay against Warlock, depending on your start. You know, if you Barnes into Rage, they really have nothing to play against it until turn 6 Siphon Soul, if they have Siphon Soul, and if they're Q block, they probably only run 1, if none. So again, it all depends on the matchup. Not one of the best decks, but a deck I've been seeing pop up more and more. And then we have another Hunter deck here that I've seen actually pop up a little bit as well. It's worth noting, it's just the big Hunter. Barnes into Violet Worm, which is a recent inclusion I put in mine. And then I mean, I've seen a lot of people start playing Violet Worm. I don't think it's because of me. I think it's a good card. I started testing it. You know, Barnes on 4 into Violet Worm into a field full of 1/1s is pretty annoying for most classes, especially when Warrior isn't that popular. Warrior has a ton of AoE for 1 damage, and to them, making a board full of 1/1s, it's a joke. But against some other classes, it's actually a very significant threat. If you look at Mage right now, especially Tempo Mage, they have no way to deal with that, and so they're just going to get wrecked. So again, I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on these two, as Hunter's really not that popular, but out of all of the Hunter decks that I happen to go against, it's either some big rendition that runs Barnes, or it's the, you know, the no minion Hunter that only runs the Barnes and the Rage. So it's kind of hurtful calling it no minion Hunter when it does run 2 minions, but because Barnes pulls Rage and Rage pulls Rage, you have no minions in the deck after that. Unfortunately, there's a couple classes that we're not going to be talking about. Druid, I haven't seen any Druid whatsoever. I base my monthly metas on what I'm playing against. So again, Jade Druid may be still out there sometimes, but we've all seen Jade Druid. It's been around for 2 years now. I'm not covering that deck, but I haven't even seen it at that. Aggro Druid has seemingly disappeared as well in the replace of Dude Paladin and Murloc Paladin. Why run a deck that's just, it's not as good as another deck that runs basically the same kind of, you know, hit him in the face as many times as possible, throw up on the board. So Druid will not be making it in this monthly meta. Shaman will not be making it. I tried to play an Elemental Shaman or a Jade Shaman. It just didn't work. The deck's not good. There was actually a spike in people who played it. But again, it's not worth mentioning due to the fact that it's just not popular, guys. It's just not, there's nothing there. So let's take a look at the Control Mage, or I like to call the Ultimate Value Mage, which is what I have here. I've been playing this deck a lot. Oh my god, this one runs Galaka Crawler. What have I done? Oh gosh, did I not update this one in here? Oh, we're just gonna casually, you guys didn't see that. There we go, the Tempo Mage. We'll take a look at the Value Mage here in a second once it gets changed. So we have the Tempo Mage here, which again, Corridor Creepers got rotated out, so we had to add a couple. We took those 2 out and added a couple more secrets and a little bit more burn. That's why it's running Pyroblast and Ice Block. Also, Potion of Polymorph, surprisingly powerful. It may not look it, but all of the Warlocks out and all of the Preset are out. Being able to throw down a Potion of Polymorph on turn 5 or 6 when they're going to play their Cabal Lackey or Draconoid Operative or Twilight Drake, whatever the case may be, you can actually line that card up very, very nicely with some pretty annoying cards in the meta right now. And people just don't expect it, so that's why that's in there. But besides that, the deck has run exactly the same as it always does. Keep in mind that the deck doesn't, a lot of players don't have the Lunith, and it's pretty important in this deck, guys. So if you don't happen to have a Lunith yet, I would recommend trying to hold off on this deck, because that's one, you may not think you need it, but it's one of the things that makes this deck, like, there was no Tempo Mage before, like, there wasn't a lot of Tempo Mage, and then we got a Lunith, and now there's all this Tempo Mage, right? So besides that, the deck really hasn't changed. We got Explosive Runes, we got a Lunith. Those are the two cards that we got. Both of them are very, very good and kind of core and essential to the deck. And again, it does very well against, a lot of times does very well against Warlock if they don't have like the perfect opener. You know, they have to have like double Dark Pact to heal past the amount of damage this deck can do. Priest is kind of annoying because they can heal. But again, if you play against Paladin, it's not so bad. Rogue is not so bad. Any class is really not so bad with this deck. It just does fairly well against everything. I guess... yeah, does pretty well against everything. You can hedge wins against most stuff. So taking a look at the correct control mage, this is a deck that we've been having a lot of success with recently, and I've actually modified it quite a bit off stream and on stream. Again, the Potion of Polymorph, kind of a weird card that you see, but as I explained in the Tempo Mage, a lot of people just don't see it coming. And if you've seen any of the recent videos of us actually playing this deck on ladder, it's come in clutch so many times. The Baron Gen's actually the most recent addition, with the Dude Paladin spiking up in play. Cards that are able to deal damage to the entire field is becoming more and more important in the deck. So not only do we have the Volcanic Potion, the Double Flame Strike, we also have Baron now to be able to clear up a lot of those guys who are basically just throwing up on the board. The cards do a fantastic job at doing that. This deck also has the ability to outvalue the control Warlock, depending on when they draw Gul'dan and when you draw Jaina. Being able to, of course, polymorph their Doom Guards and to avoid Daddies is very important. And then also, again, against other aggro decks, it just performs very well. And against the Spiteful Priest, which is, again, another really popular deck, this deck has enough AoE and single target removal to basically deal with everything they play, unless they have the God Curve and their Draconoid Operative, you know, takes your Jaina, and then you're kind of sad. So again, depends on the matchup and the draws, but the deck is, in my opinion, very, very, very good at the moment, and it's a ton of fun to play. Again, looking at our list here, we have Warrior, and unfortunately, there's currently no Warrior decks worth putting in here at all. Not even Pirate Warrior, again, with the nerfs to the Pirates, that hurts it. There's no form of Control Warrior that's good, and Big Warrior, unfortunately, again, just sucks as well. So not very popular there. But taking a look at Warlock, we have the Control Warlock deck. I've been playing the same rendition of this particular list for a while now, and I looked at a couple other sites, and it's relatively the same. Some people run the Stonehill Defender to generate more Void Daddies. That's also in there. Some players run the what's her name, the Nomaratsu, to discard the top card of your opponent's deck. Again, that's a viable option as well. This is just my personal take on the deck. I've been running this list for a while, and I really enjoy it. It works out really well, and it hedges against, you know, a variety of different decks. So this is my pick, but if you don't agree with any of the cards, feel free to change them to the cards that you see fit. Between the Control Warlock that we have here and the Q block, that again is another really popular Warlock deck that kind of runs very similar cards but doesn't actually have the same game plan in the end game. Both are very good. Both have their kind of pros and cons. This one being a little bit slower and wanting to outvalue and kind of just wither your opponent out. More so the Q block here. Let's pull that one up just so you can see what I'm talking about. The Q block has cards like the Faceless Manipulator, the Doom Guard, and the Cube. To be able to copy and or destroy and bring back giant minions in the deck like Mountain Giant and Doom Guard, ideally Doom Guard. So you play Doom Guard, you attack with them, then from there you can cube Doom Guard, and then you Dark Pact cube, and then you make 2 more Doom Guards, or you could cube, and then you Prince Tarum the cube, or Faceless Manipulator the cube, and then you can bring back 4 Doom Guards, and then when you go down, you basically bring back a whole field full of Doom Guards and or Void Daddies. I mean, you could use the Faceless Manipulator, the Cube, and or the Tarum on Void Daddies if you're playing against an aggro deck, or if you're playing against a control deck and you just don't happen to have the Doom Guards, it works. Also the Skull, the legendary Warlock's weapon, allows you to summon all of these very expensive, especially Doom Guard, which makes you discard 2 cards if you just play them outright. Very expensive and annoying cards for free at the beginning of every turn, allowing you to use the remainder of your mana to either duplicate them or kill them off and bring them back and whatnot. So really annoying deck to play against, very popular deck on ladder, very powerful deck. So I would have to say both of these decks, as of right now, it's like when you play against a Warlock, it's like 50-50. You just don't know. But if you find ones that start playing the weapon, it's probably Doom, or it's probably the Q block. And you know, if you see like a Stonehill Defender, most of the time it's more of so the control. You can tell normally in the first couple turns where they're going, but you can't actually tell because there's a lot of people who just mix and match. You know, they'll run the weapon in their control lock for some reason, or people will run the Stonehill Defenders in their Q block. I mean, some people just, I don't know. They're doing some next level shit. But both of those decks very, very good in the tier 1 spot at the moment. And that's actually going to wrap up our monthly meta. If I happen to forget anything or left anything out, or if you'd like to further explain on any of these decks, feel free to do that in the comment section below. I try to go over as much as I can, as fast as I can, in as short amount of time as possible. But with some of these decks, you know, it takes a little bit more to explain them. And with that, thanks for watching, and I will catch you next month when the new set is going to be coming out. So expect, you know, of course, the card reviews prior to the set releasing, and my initial thoughts on the card, and then again once the cards come out, there'll be another monthly meta shortly after that to kind of show off all the new decks that I've been seeing on ladder, and of course the decks that we've been building. So with that, catch you in the next episode. I'm Rob, of course, or Warshak, and happy whatever the hell day it is.